Just as a disclaimer, this meeting and this session of Drawing Days is being recorded for our YouTube channel, for the TEA YouTube channel. Hello, I'm Sam Lieberstein. I'm currently with Thinkwell Group, and welcome to Drawing Days, episode 3. For those who have been here before to our previous episodes, welcome back. To those who are joining us for the first time, welcome. We're so happy to have all of you here. For those who are unaware, this series is an event in which we are trying to teach a lesson in visual communication through sketching. A lot of times, several of us in the industry don't have the confidence or the skill set to be able to sketch, to communicate ideas that we want to, whether it's in a charrette, whether it's a drinks with a colleague or friend for a cocktail napkin sketch. This whole series is focused on anyone from any skill set and skill level, whether you're just starting out in the industry and you're a project coordinator, or you're someone in business development, or you're an engineer, or even if you're an experienced graphic or art director who just wants to get back to basics for a little bit and have some fun at lunchtime. So we welcome everyone of every skill set and every background to have some fun with us in a lesson in visual communication. Joining us today, our special teacher is Corinne Antonelli from Quantum Creative. Corinne is a concept artist currently working with Quantum Creative Studios. While her illustrations cover a wide range of subjects, Corinne has always loved costume and puppet illustration the most. Besides her work in the themed entertainment world, you can also spot Corinne's artwork on a United Airlines Boeing 757 passenger aircraft, her biggest project to date. So, all right, Corinne, go ahead and take it away. Tell us what we're going to be learning today.
Yeah, okay, so can everybody hear me okay? We're good, Sam?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so hi everybody, I'm Corinne. It's nice to meet everybody. I've seen some of the familiar faces and names here, but for anybody new, thanks for taking the time to hang out with me. And as Sam mentioned before, I'm currently a concept artist and an illustrator at Quantum Creative Studios, but today I figured taking a little bit of a step away from what I normally do at work and do what I love most, which is costumes and puppet design. And what I thought would be fun today is all of us to kind of collaborate on kind of like a parade, a mini parade of our own with our own little costume illustrations. So anyone who signed up for this TEA event, you could have received a link to two little croquis drawings. These, you might see them on the screen here. Oh, I'm not pinned, but they're basically two little mannequin characters that if you're having trouble kind of creating a base to do your costume illustration on, I figured I could help you out and we can kind of have this nice base that we can all work on together. But to start out, I thought it would be important to still sort of talk about how you can make your own sort of croquis character so that you don't always need to use a little base like I provided here. I'm also going to drop a link in the Google Drive if anybody has like an iPad or something and wants to just like download it that way. But so to start off, I kind of want to talk about how we can kind of take something as simple as almost a stick person and convert it into, a base to do a costume illustration on. So in this case, we're going to start with very, very basic shapes so that everybody can hopefully, communicate effectively. And in this case, I'm just using just a regular, like a 2B pencil that is getting quite small. So I have to get a new one soon. But so in this case, I think everybody is capable enough of drawing basically a bunch of triangles and a bunch of circles and a bunch of squares. And that's kind of what we're going to start off with today. So I'm going to start by drawing literally just a rectangle and coloring it in. We're starting with silhouettes here. I know it's tiny, but I want to make sure that we can kind of fit our bigger character on the side here. But in this case, literally that rectangle is going to be our head, and that's all you need to do, just a rectangle. And then kind of making the line for the shoulders there, right underneath. I kind of tend to not make my heads actually connect to the body with these little, tiny little ones to make sure that my pose is just fine the way it is. But a rule of thumb with human anatomy and human, I guess, illustration is that whichever way the shoulders are tilting, so in my case, they're kind of tilting, the left side is down and the right side is up. The hips go the opposite way in your pose. So kind of like, even if it's a slight angle, shoulders go up, hips go down. That's kind of the rule of thumb that we kind of follow here to create a little bit more of a dynamic illustration. And in this case, I think what I'm going to do is make just like a simple little triangle for his arm and a simple little triangle over here. So those are our two arms. Then literally just connecting those two arms to our little hip line there, here and here. And then as simple as, again, two more triangles for our legs. And kind of coloring that whole thing in just so we can see sort of the silhouette and the shape. Those of you who have seen costume illustration or just themed entertainment illustration know that this guy makes a frequent appearance in a lot of like show set illustrations and whatnot. That the little stick man is always there for size reference and whatnot. But now, so we have our kind of general guy, our pose. You can make them kind of whatever sort of proportions you want. And that's the fun of this. And I think that's why, you know, this is super important. But how we can take that and translate it over to a tangible sort of, you know, more fleshed out person that we can illustrate our costume on top of is the same principle, really. Squares, circles, triangles, etc. It's simple shapes. And we're going to break it down so that everybody can hopefully create a person. But what's fun about costume illustration is that all the person's proportions can be stretched a little bit. That's why I like it, because figure drawing is actually my weakest subject. It was the only C I ever got in college was figure drawing. So in this case, you know, we're going to start with a circle at the top of our page about where we want the head to be. A lot of you may remember from the olden days, especially at Hollywood studios, they had the animation drawing class and they tried to break it down into the most simple drawing shapes as possible so that anybody can draw Mickey or anybody can draw whoever. But in this case, we're starting with our head. And sort of what I like to do is break that head into two and extend that line kind of down where I want the chin to be. And then also kind of in the middle of your circle where you want your eyes to be. In this case, my guy's going to be kind of looking down a little bit. And that kind of will help keep everything aligned in the shape of the head. So really now all you have to do is connect the edge of your circle to that little point you ended up at the chin. So there you go, there's your head. And for male characters, more specifically, it's a little bit more like chiseled out. We like to make the lines a little bit sharper versus having a, you know, more pointed jawline. I just added an ear there too, just to have that in there. And I'm gonna add a nose, because why not? Again, another little triangle to kind of symbolize the nose. So now that we have our head, we can kind of base the rest of our proportions off of it. But again, as I mentioned before, it's not, you know, super critical that we get everything super perfect. That's why costume illustration is the best, because everybody can be a little bit stretched and it's okay. So in this case, going back to what we did in our previous little character here, having our hips and our shoulders be kind of opposite of each other. So in this case, again, I'm keeping the same thing that I did here. Hips going one way and shoulders going the other way. Kind of, for now, it's a little bit of a guess. I'm a little bit too short for my desk, so I'm hoping my character is not going to stretch out in the process, but I'm kind of like using the zoom as the same as the guideline here. But okay, so we now have our shoulders and our hips. And again, the general rule is for male characters, shoulders are wider than the hips. It's a little bit less prevalent in a female character. It's actually the opposite. Shoulders are, you know, smaller than the hips sometimes, but in this case, we're going to make him kind of like that, you know, Dorito guy style. So, you know, so now we have our shoulders and our hips, right? And what we can do is kind of create a base for the torso to go into. And in this case, again, you can keep it as simple as possible as a circle. Literally, that's all it is. And sometimes I like to even add a little bit of a rib cage just by creating almost like this bean sort of shape inside, so that we kind of know where his ribs would in theory kind of go. And what I like to do, again, same thing with the head, is kind of divide this down the middle so that I keep the rest of the body in proportion. So now kind of going off of our hips, again, it's the same thing. We kind of create almost like a circle for our hips to go on. Little bean shape, circle, whatever it ends up being is okay. And what I like to do is, what's really important with characters is that you make sure that the weight is resting on one of their feet and the other one is a little bit less weight bearing. So in this case, I think I'm going to make the back leg the weight foot and the front leg kind of sticking out. So he's kind of like posed, super cool. So in this case, what I like to do just to map out my legs is kind of guesstimate where the hip bone would be, where it connects to the, you know, the hip, the leg bone and the hip. my anatomy is really bad, hence my C in figure class. But so, kind of creating a line and a dot where we think that kneecap is going to go. And then again, bringing it down to where we think the foot's going to go. And again, my foot is just a triangle right now. And for this foot, I wanted to kind of not be so turned out, but more kind of turned forward towards the viewer. So he's like kind of standing, kind of lounged. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to come back up to the arms. I hate arms, so I'm always saving them for last. But in this case, I think I want to have this arm kind of down at his side. Maybe we could eventually have the character like holding something. So I'm going to leave a little bit of room out here. So again, just like line, dot, and line. And this arm is a little bit more out, so he's a little bit more naturally posed. So I'm going to do a bigger curve for this one and kind of guesstimate where that elbow would be. And in this case, the hands are freaking hard. So I'm not in this case, what I'm going to do is I'm going to kind of just draw almost like, again, another little weird bean shape, because I just, hands are hard. It will forever be hands are hard. And half the time in costume illustrations, we like don't even bother with the hands unless they're holding something. So in this case, there we go. Look at that. You have a person, a stick person, and he's ready to be bulked up a little bit. He's gotta start lifting some weights. So kind of taking what we did already here, again, it's just circles and lines and triangles. So in this case, what we're gonna do is kind of start bulking out the shoulders and the chest, and kind of, again, you can make them a little bit like superhero-y. It doesn't have to be super particular, but in this case, I kind of just like adding a rough idea of where I think some of the muscles are. And again, the more you do this, the more familiar you'll come with where things tend to fall. But in this case, I'm using our base that we created to kind of make the majority of our shapes. So I'm filling out his torso here, connecting the hips, then widening them at the hips, and then kind of like down here where the legs would start. And also sort of at the arms, just very roughly blocking him in where the muscles would go. See, if this was like an actual figure drawing class and I actually kind of knew what I was doing, I would actually tell you where the muscles are, but I really kind of don't. So we're gonna just kind of rough it in together with more circles and lines kind of where those muscles were gonna meet. So same thing in the kneecap, I'm gonna put a little circle and then connecting our leg.
Short. That's, exactly what you're doing. That's why I asked you to teach us.
I mean, it's funny because the other, Judy and Josh, they did more like structures, and that's my favorite thing to do. Anybody who follows me on Instagram might have seen some of my theme park sketches that I like to do. So when I was like, I want to be different, but like, am I gonna do people? Like, I'm not good at people, and I don't do it that often at work, which is kind of sad. But I figured that's why I like costume design, work around it, find a solution, and make your character a little bit more kooky looking. And it just gives it more character.
We'll just have to have you back to do the other stuff too.
Yeah, no, we should seriously, I would love to have some sort of event where like everybody meets up at some location, everybody sits and draws together. Like
I would love that.
That would be so fun. And then like, you always get so much attention from like the park guests too, like they'll come over and be like, wow, that is just so good. And I'm like, oh my God, like, please just let me draw. Like, like I don't like attention. So like when we're at Disney and I'm like trying to like study this, that, and the other thing. And, someone comes over and is like, oh, can I see? Or, wow, that is just so good. Or they should hire you. I'm like, oh my God, like, let me just draw, please. Like,
trying to focus. Yes. Jeez, leave me alone.
Seriously, it's a lot, especially when it's like 10,000 degrees outside and you just kind of want to die and you're sitting there drawing. And I'm like, why did I subjugate myself to this? Like, okay. So yeah, I mean, I'm just filling them out. We're keeping it very basic again. For kneecaps, I like to add just like a little bit of shading on certain parts to add a little bit of depth. I'm adding it over here under the arm to just kind of signify that piece of him is kind of going back in space because he's a little bit turned. Also, another way, I guess this goes along with our idea of like how to communicate your ideas effectively. A way to show that something is 3D, I know it's like flat on the paper, but a good way to kind of show that is almost drawing these curved lines over the surface where the shape in theory would bow out or curve. So in this case, since the arm is kind of going, forward in space, those lines would be kind of rolling down. It's a little bit hard to explain. Anybody who printed out my croaky characters, it's very, very, very faint, but I left them on there just so that you can see that, you know, everything kind of has that like 3D nature to it, even though it's like a 2D character. So like the chest kind of would go out and the waist would kind of go in, if that makes sense. We could talk about it a little bit more when we get to that point. But yeah, so we're finishing up our character here, and I'm hoping everybody has some sort of base that they can work on, I hope. For feet, again, it's the same principle as hands. I don't like doing them, so I kind of just draw like a triangle, and that's the end of the foot here. Yeah, I mean, we try to keep it as simple as possible, and a lot of the times what I do is if I get some sort of costume design assignment for whatever reason, I will do what I've provided the croquis, the little mannequins, and I'll do like 10 on the same sort of croquis and just print it out like 10 times or use Photoshop and whatnot. So yeah, so I'm gonna make his hand into kind of like a fist, but again, this is kind of my life hack when you don't know how to draw hands, just kind of make them into a fist. That's just like 2 squares for the fingers and then a square for the palm, and there's your hand. So he can be like holding like a cool staff or something. Here's his cool staff. He's ready for action. So looking at the time here, I think if we're feeling okay about this, I'd like to kind of get going with actually picking our theme of our kind of costume parade design. So yeah, I'm gonna leave mine here so you guys can look at it in case anybody's catching up still. I'm sorry if I'm going a little bit fast, but I want to make sure we have time to like flesh out our costume. But so what I did was I made a cup of themes that are kind of holiday-y, but not necessarily Christmas. They're just kind of general holiday so that we have as much room as possible to play. And I'm gonna pick one for our theme of our costume here. All right, here we go. Snowman. This is funny because that's the one that I didn't really prepare for.
You can choose to do it, or you can as a hard mode for
well, that's
this.
part of the you know with the spontaneity of this whole thing. But so we're gonna get to it. So I gave you guys both a male and a female here. Anybody who wants to draw, I know we did a male in the warm-up. I had planned on doing both, but I went too slow. So we're gonna just stick with the guy. So what I usually like to do for these sort of things, I have a little bit of a reference library next to me. I'll show it for a quick second. These are costumes from a lot of, oh no, go back. A lot of parades or other sort of like themed events. And I have this big Pinterest board sort of full of ideas and shapes. So look, see, here's a snowman costume here. You know, something like that. I really, really, really like the costumes from like overseas parks. I like how they have very extravagant like headpieces. It's a little bit more intense than it is over here. I've come to sort of notice that they put a lot more weirdness into their costumes. Like this is kind of weird, but it's like a good weird. Like it's different. She's an ornament, but it's cool. Like so. I think that's what I like to do, a lot of headpiece-based costumes. Anybody who has seen my thesis or my portfolio kind of can spot that a lot in there. It's kind of everywhere. The costumes on the little advertisement for this event had all crazy headpieces. But in our case, I'm going to start with the female. And for the snowman, what I think I want to do is kind of be a little bit less stereotypical about it. Like I'm not going to give her like a ball of snow and like her head is not going to be like a giant sort of ball. But instead, I kind of want to dress her to appear that way. So I think what I want to do is do almost like an off the shoulder sort of fluffy thing and have the skirt sort of be that same sort of motif. Something that I found in costume is to kind of continue a motif throughout kind of makes the whole thing a little bit more cohesive because, you know, it's like you have endless possibilities with costume design. So it's like it can kind of go anywhere. But in this case, I think I'm going to do some sort of fluffy material on gloves, on the sort of neckline of this like off the shoulder dress that she would wear, and then on the hem of the dress is what I'm thinking. And in this case, to me, snowmen are, I see them as like very, I don't want to say like gentle sort of things. You make them and they're always smiling, but then they melt and it's kind of sad. But when you make them, there's that whole like idea of them being gentle. So in this case, I kind of want to make her almost like, you know, like the snow lady, the like snow wife lady who likes to bake something, but it's ironic that she likes to bake because, you know, ovens are hot and she's a snowman. Maybe that's what we'll do. Maybe that's the story behind this. But in this case, what I think I'll do is we'll start kind of by fluffing up this neckline here. And in this case, I'll just color it in so you guys can see it a little bit better. So it's like a fluffy sort of snow. And I would love, you know, obviously with color, you can communicate this a little bit more, but I would love if there was sort of stuff like stuck in there, like, you know, how things fall from trees and they get stuck in the snow. So maybe there's like a pine cone or something in here, and maybe some like pine leaves. I'm just thinking of pine stuff, but, you know, so there's like stuff sort of stuck in there to create some interest, I think. Yeah, so I drew some scribbles to kind of communicate. The pine leaves and pine cones are kind of just like squiggles because, you know, pine cones have a lot of different layers to them. So in this case, this would be something that color would help communicate, but I will draw them a little bit darker so that they pop a little bit more against this, this fluffy white sort of collar here. And then usually with these parade performers, they have a little bit of like a leotard of some sort or like an under sort of color bodysuit. And in this case, I try to think that if it's hopefully not, you know, somewhere where it's super hot during the winter, they would have it maybe all the way up to the necks. So we can add a pop of color here. So I just drew the little neckline of this little leotard underneath, and I'm going to shade it so that it stands out different from the rest of the skin here. So in this case, I think what we want to do, since we decided that she might be some sort of baker or snow lady that likes to, maybe she likes to kind of cook with stuff that's in the woods where she was built. I don't know. So maybe I'll add some sort of apron, but we need to kind of make it almost like a pun. Maybe not a pun, but maybe the apron is some sort of like snowflake design so that the bottom, the hem of the apron kind of has those like points of a snowflake. So that way it's kind of reading she's just like a whimsical sort of snow person that has an apron that's made out of a giant snowflake that she's kind of like tied around her waist, and the little points of the snowflake are like sticking out the back where she tied it. So I'm kind of just going, I'm guessing here what the points of a snowflake look like, but I'm kind of just making them like weird and jagged and trying to match the shapes from the other little points here. Yeah, so there's her little apron. I'm also fanning out the skirt here. Something that I love about parade costumes is they have such structure on the bottom. Like when people twirl, sometimes they have some spin, but sometimes there's just like no spin and it's super fun. I don't know why I like the idea of having like a super fluffy like tutu bottom that doesn't move and doesn't like get flat or anything. So in this case, here's the bottom of our skirt. It's just a big triangle. And then I'm going to go back with that motif of the snow and add a fluffy little hem here. You know, just like clouds in elementary school, you're just drawing the little squiggles here. And again, we'll add in those pine cones and whatnot just for now to kind of hold that place of something is kind of wedged in there and it has some interest and it's not just like cotton fluff being stuck on the skirt here. So since this is so structured, I don't really have to worry too much about folds and wrinkles because that's a whole nother situation. Folds and wrinkles are super hard, so I'm trying to make it more simple. But if you want to indicate any sort of folds or wrinkles, you could just draw kind of some suggestions of it with like lines here and there. Yeah, so that's where we're at right now. Checking the time, we got time, it's good. So what kind of shoes should this person be wearing? I'm thinking that since they're a snowman and they don't really have feet, we might do like almost like an over the knee sort of. A lot of the times with these costumes, I believe they kind of use like a standard shoe or a standard boot and just like cover it in like a boot cover that sort of snaps underneath the heel and the ball of the foot. So in this case, we might just want to make it white, and you wouldn't even see, in this case, you wouldn't really even see that. But I think what I want to do is, besides just making it like a white little boot here by adding our heel, what else we can do to kind of make this more snowman-y. I'm trying to think of what else snowmen usually wear besides like a hat. I have gloves here too that I want to keep with that white theme with the little leotard here. Coal buttons. It's a good idea. Do you think we should add them on like the bodice of the dress, or should they be somewhere else? I like that idea, Ellen.
You could do them. I'm thinking like I feel like a sort of classic snowman always has like just like the 1, 2, 3, but you've kind of turned everything else on its head. So maybe they don't actually go right down the middle.
We could put suggestions of them maybe on the apron as like little details here. Or like, yeah, we could do that. So maybe it would be like almost like a little button kind of on each one of these points to kind of keep that motif of like the snowman with the buttons. But then around it, there might be some sort of paint treatment. I don't know what, just some sort of design to kind of add some sparkle or whatnot to that area. I would also like to take some time on the feet. I just thought of maybe adding that same sort of pine cone motif that we have up here, kind of adding a little bit of those layers to the ankle so that we have maybe a little bit of that pine cone motif, like continuing, almost like the legs are not like made out of pine cones, but like it's just kind of there in the snow, because remember, this is like a white sort of stocking over the boot. So there's some pine cones there to add some interest. We might be able to even add some sort of shading to the heel to make it some sort of color to tie into any of these other things. But floating back up here to the gloves so that we can finish this one off, the clothes part of this one. I want to keep that fluff theme going up here. I don't think I'm going to add pine cones to this one though. I'm going to just keep it sort of as the plain fluff. And then the gloves will be that same white so that the legs and the hands sort of have that same continuation. So for the head, I'm still kind of stumped on this. I kind of want to almost make it like top hat, but maybe it can incorporate a carrot. So I was thinking, that's funny. Hi, Nicole. We could do not a top hat, but a beret, but the beret could have the carrot because she's a little bit more like, I don't know what the word is, like she's like frilly because of this, you know, it's like a cutesy dress. So the top hat we could totally do for the male costume, but I'm thinking in this case with the beret, we can sort of have a suggestion of like a hat, and then we can add the little carrot coming out or something like that. I don't know, would it be cheesy to add eyes on the beret? I kind of want to like imagine that, like walking around with a little snowman hat. Yes, I like it. Yes.
You can never go wrong with googly eyes.
Well, yeah, I mean, maybe in this case, it would even continue that coal motif that Ellen suggested before. So having the same sort of coal pieces from the apron can make their way onto the hat. So it's kind of like, I also want to add a tiny bit of that fluffy stuff around the rim of the hat so that everything's kind of in their same spot. I love also kind of contributing to the like a mini melted snowman hat. Yes, slowly melting because she likes to bake. Yeah, so in this case, I don't think we have any specific plans for the hair. We could kind of make it a suggestion of like the rolled sort of snowballs that you use to make the hairs or make the snowman. So maybe I'll do like little space buns like on the side of her head. So it's like the little snowman, you know, but I love those like foam hair headpiece things. I think you guys know what I'm talking about. They're like really popular with a lot of parades overseas, especially where it's just like a foam piece that's hair, but I think it's like an effective way to like give a performer like a super cool hairstyle that's probably impossible to do with real hair. So in this case, let's just do like, so there's the continuation of like, you know, the rolled snowball. So she's like a snowman now. Okay.
So I guess that's a good question too, is when you are going through all the pieces of the costume, when you're deciding which motifs and to go with, how are you deciding where to place them so they don't compete with one another?
So I will say that is something I'm working on still. I have a tendency to go overboard with placing things, but I think for me, it's all about balance. And if you have like a lot of chaos, for in this case, a lot of craziness kind of going on in the skirt and fluffiness and pine cones and then the apron, I decided to keep the shoes a little bit more simple because the eye kind of needs a place to rest when you're, looking at this performer coming down the street. You'll kind of notice it a lot with these costumes too. This ornament one we talked about earlier. The sleeves are the place to rest here because there's so much chaos kind of going on in the skirt. And that tends to be a theme with costumes, is that if you want them to look crazy, like here's another snowman one, this one's a little bit more simple. It gives your eye a place to rest kind of all around, but it does have little patterns on the boots and the mittens. But, some of them are just crazy and they just don't give your eye a place to rest ever. So it's kind of, but pattern here, solid here. That's what I try to, it's like almost how you would style your own clothing. You wouldn't wear like a pattern on a pattern unless it was like, crazy pattern day at work or whatever, so it's about kind of, if you think it's too much and it's kind of making your eyes go all over the place and you're darting all over the place, then like, maybe it's time to dial it back. Unless that's the theme of the parade, because some of them are kind of crazy. Like Magic Happens at Disneyland is a good example of that. Those costumes are crazy and there's no place to rest, but it kind of works because that's the theme of the parade. It's very like all about magic and over the top, extravagant. So, that whole thing. It's kind of just use your best judgment / give the eye a place to rest. Solid colors and patterns sort of mixing together, I'd say. But if everyone's cool with it, I'm going to move on to the male costume. And I was wondering, how does everybody feel about picking a different theme for the male costume?
Sure.
Is that cool? Okay. So that. Cool. All right, what we get? Presents. Okay. Let's see here. Okay, so in this case, male costumes, I like doing ladies better just because I'm like kind of frilly myself, so I like frilly costumes on girls. But in this case, I think I almost want to turn the idea of a present like into a hat, like we were talking about before. So maybe instead of the top hat having like a circular sort of cylinder as the hat part, maybe it's like a square present. So the part of the hat is the present. But I almost want to make his outfit like wrapping paper, whether that's like some sort of, I like to do, because in winter we tend to dress the performers like in winter clothes, stuff that could, in theory, I guess, be worn outside. But I kind of want to make his jacket have like these tails of wrapping paper that like swoop out the back. So it's one of those like tail coats, but the tails are like strips of wrapping paper. Or even a bow, but I think a bow, see, this is kind of where the judgment comes in play. I think a bow would be more on a female costume and a wrapping paper tail would be more of like a male costume thing. I don't know why. That's kind of just what I'm thinking, but all right, so he's gonna have a long tail coat. And the question is now, it needs to be exciting because this is kind of the main piece of the costume. This coat takes up, 75% of our performer here. So we want to make sure that it's interesting. So I'm thinking maybe what we can do is make, the little things that like hold the coat together. They're like little buckles or something that kind of go down the front here. Maybe we can make those like little ribbons and they could have small bows sort of holding them in place. So I'm kind of just like doing little bows as the buttons, and then I'm connecting them in the middle as that like ribbon string to hold the jacket shut. Something like that. So now I'm thinking, is this crazy? I don't know if this is crazy. I'm kind of thinking that it would be interesting to add something of interest on the sleeves, but would it be weird to make it so that the wrapping paper is almost like ripped and it's going like his jacket is made of paper, so it's like ripping up the sleeves? Or we can do even some sort of, what else do presents have?
Tissue paper.
Tissue paper.
If it's
Oh
in a
yeah,
bag.
like those like Regency shirts with like the sleeves that come out of the, something like that. Okay. I like the idea of like fluffy tissue paper kind of coming out of the jacket. So there's layering happening there. So I'm gonna just kind of put our jacket on our arm here and have that like crumpled tissue paper coming out of the arm. See, this is why I like working with other people when it comes to this stuff, because I'm like, I would have been sitting there being like, what the heck do I do?
Hey, I
Tissue
mean,
paper.
this is already going in a completely different direction than I thought it would. So I was like, let's make a mecha suit out of presents.
Oh my God. Well, hey, if you want your character to have a mecha suit out of presents, like by all means, please, we can make our parade as diverse as possible here.
Exactly.
You know, my little, you know, things will be followed by your giant like stilt walker performer with
In the
oh my
mecha suit.
goodness.
That's a
Crazy,
great
crazy.
suggestion, Jeff. Gift tags. Who it's
Yes,
from
I
and who
was gonna
it's
stick
to.
a tag on the hat, so it's kind of like a point of interest where we do. So there'll be the present hat. I kind of want to make it like 3D so that we can see what's happening. Big present hat, and I'm gonna just, even though this is totally not perspective correct, I'm gonna just add a present. Can you talk about how you draw the clothes around the figure to communicate the fit? Yeah, totally. So what we do, what I like to do is that when something is obviously close fitting it, keeping it as close as possible to the mannequin. But in this case, you know, on the sleeves here, most jackets are not like so tight to the point of where your wrist is like restrictive. And especially with a jacket here, the fact that there's this tissue paper shirt underneath it means there has to be a room for another layer underneath it, because that was I'm going to continue that tissue paper motif up here so that it pops out sort of the neckline of this, so that underneath is this tissue paper shirt. But so yeah, I mean, the poofier things are sort of the further away from the body you want to draw them. So in this case, you know, I'm going to jump over here for a second. Let's say I wanted to have the like a bishop sleeve. It's super popular right now. It's a poofy sleeve that comes to a cuff at the end of the wrist. So having my arm here, right, here's my arm. If I sort of take the fabric and move it around the arm, we now have a really poofy sleeve. And sometimes you can even add little wrinkles at the bottom here to communicate, hey, all of that poofy fabric is being, you know, sewn into this smaller sleeve. And that sort of helps communicate it's like a thicker, more poofy sleeve. And even sort of, you know, when you do your color, you can have it be transparent. So maybe the arm is being seen through it. And that also can help communicate, you know, that there's an arm underneath here, but this fabric is poofy. So it's going to not exactly, you know, align with the arm. Yes, the Seinfeld pirate shirt. I understand that reference. Okay, so back to the task at hand here. Ellen, I hope that answered your question. I'm sorry if I'm like zooming here. I want to make sure.
You're good. Thank you so much. That was helpful.
And if
Totally.
anyone else has any questions too, please feel free to put them in the chat and I'll read them aloud as we go.
I will also, I guess, at the end of this, make sure that I put like my Instagram handle and all that in the chat so that if you guys have any questions I didn't get to, you could totally reach out to me.
Awesome.
So,
thank you for that.
Keeping with our sort of square boxy theme here, instead of making the brim of the hat like your stereotypical like circle, it's a square. And I'm going to put that bow on top here and have the ribbon sort of being wrapped around the present. So it's like a present hat. So I think with male costumes, especially, I've tended to notice that the headpieces are a little bit more crazy because you can't really put as crazy of a hairstyle. Oh, thank you. There's my Instagram and my portfolio. If anybody is interested in seeing some more of my kind of crazy costume designs that I like to do. But so I think what I want to do here is that continuing with this like ribbon motif that we have going now here, I think I kind of want to make this almost like, you know, those like sashes that those suits have with like tuxes. It's like a sash in the middle of the waist that sometimes is the same color as the bow tie or, you know, whatever, maybe complementing the suit. Let's make this part here also like a ribbon. So we'll have this like red color kind of continuing here. I'm not sure what to do for the pants. I kind of want to keep the ribbon theme going because we have it now 2 places. Maybe we should keep it going the 3rd place with the shoes being like ribbons. They can be like tall boots with like the ribbon. You know how ribbons sort of are cut this way sometimes to make like a fancy, cute ribbon, we can add like a boot, and then we can add like a point. So he's so cute. So there's my fancy cut ribbon. I don't know how else everybody cuts ribbons, but I've seen it done a lot that way on those like professionally wrapped. And giving the shoe like a little point kind of keeps that going here and here. I bet this performer would probably actually be like holding a real present too. Like, I'm not sure, but in this case, I think in terms of patterns, kind of going back to our theme from this one, I think what I want to do is the coat might have some sort of pattern on it. I don't know why I'm thinking like not plaid, but like a very subtle, like not flannel. Is it flannel? Like, those like flannel patterns, something like that to kind of
Pinstripe?
Pinstripe, not stripes, because stripes are weird. They get distorted and weird around when the costume gets stretched out. Holiday Nutcracker vibe. Yeah, I guess I'll just call it like a flannel plaid. It's kind of just like, and this is another good way when you're drawing patterns to kind of convey how that clothing is like forming to a person, whichever way those stripes are sort of laying, if they have a slight bend to them, if they're straight. We also have to keep in mind where these arms would be sewn on, here and here. Ever since starting to take an interest in costume design, I've actually taught myself like how to sew. And I think that's helped significantly with actually like designing these things and knowing where that pattern would stop and start if it was being, sewn in real life is super helpful, and kind of, understanding how stuff, falls on the body and whatnot. So I'm kind of making it like checkered plaid. Then in this case, this will be a long piece. So much fabric, I love it. But yeah, because I guess I think where I'm getting this idea is that a lot of wrapping paper has super cool patterns on it. So I kind of want to like have that as the theme here. It could even be like a pattern with like Christmas trees or some sort of, reindeer or whatever. But for the sake of this demonstration, that's kind of hard to draw a million little reindeers, but all right. I'm feeling pretty good about this. And then, the tag up here would have like to and from whoever. I missed the bow entirely. Adding that. I'm gonna fix that because it's bothering me. I also forgot an eraser. So thank you, eraser. Okay. So here we go. So there's your little gift tag, to and from. Something like that. Okay. Well, so now what? I rushed.
It's okay. We have two amazing costume designs for our little parade. So with some extra time left, we can open it up to some questions and answers if anyone has any questions. It'd be fun to open up for a little Q&A.
If not, I could totally do like a third one if we're feeling it. Why not? I can answer questions and do a third one at the same time.
Sure.
Why not? Do you ever get intimidated? Yes. For those of you who don't know, I just graduated last year, so I'm fairly new to this whole thing. So I try my best to just kind of like walk with my head up and, not be intimidated by others because, everybody comes from different backgrounds. Everyone has experience from here, there, everywhere. And, everybody's going to bring a different opinion to the table. And a lot of the times that's the most helpful, like people to work with is people who have been in this industry longer than you. But yeah, I truly do value people who value my opinion, even the fact that I am so new to this. It really kind of is a confidence booster. But okay.
Well, we definitely value you here in the Drawing Days series. So
yeah, I appreciate it.
That's the best part about this whole program is that we want to highlight everyone who from different backgrounds who are not usually highlighted and to show their skill set and to have them teach us who who definitely needs some help sketching, like myself, because I have no idea what I'm doing most of the time. So I love that it helps to foster the sense of community in our industry and, go back to our core values of helping each other.
It's definitely scary. It's definitely scary. Especially for, I've been trying to slowly introduce all of my team members into like doing art more. Like we have like these like weekly, like, hey, everybody, we're going to meet and draw. And like none of them they're like, oh, okay, well, of course yours are going to be like super good. I'm like, no, but that's the point. It's supposed to be fun. And it's kind of cool seeing like, cause I'm the only illustrator on our team. So it's kind of fun to like slowly introduce my like colleagues to like doing art with me. And some of my colleagues are even doing like outside of work, like drawing classes. And it's just so cute because I'm like, great, now if I'm ever dying, I can have some assistance from other people. But okay. So we got some questions here. How is Jason great at drawing? Oh my God. How do you start your color story for costumes? So I'm going to have these here while I'm talking about them. So what I think is important to understand is that there's a lot of stereotypical like color palettes for things. And especially for holiday stuff, it's like, do I want to go the classic like green and red and white, or do I want to do something a little bit more unique? So if I guess my thesis is a good example of this, is like I had 4 elements: air, earth, water, and fire. And all of those elements, like I was like, there's the stereotypical colors for these things, but then there's also, a more unique approach to them. Let me see, do I have a copy of my book? Yes, okay. I'm going to show it so I can have basis to talk about here. But
Awesome.
So what I want people to understand is that, so here was my color palette for earth. I don't know if that's necessarily the colors you would associate with earth besides, the green, but other than that, I decided to use like blue and red and orange. And just basically, it's just, I like to play with a lot of different variations. So here was a variation, and then, here's the one that I ended up on, and kind of keeping in mind what is aesthetic and what's appealing to you, and what do you like seeing in either theme park costumes or movie costumes is a huge one that people don't really think about too much. But yeah, I'll sometimes just get out my markers and swatch a couple things. I'll play with it in Photoshop. And a lot of the times what I'll do is I'll scan in these drawings and I'll select them as different layers in Photoshop and just paint bucket and have like 5 or 6 different ones laying out there in front of me. So you can find what works for some of them and what's not working and kind of combine them all into one final design. So yeah, I think I hope that answers your question. It's a lot of playing. I never just instantly sit down and I'm like, yep, that's the color scheme. Like it's never that easy. I wish it was, but okay. How do you incorporate story into costumes like how you did with the baking snow person? I think it's kind of a matter of, you have to think, I like to think about who's going to be wearing the costume and what their background might be and how they can, helping them kind of play their character. Because I feel like a lot of times in parades, especially, they're kind of just like, walk around and look happy. But I feel like it would be a little bit more of like a show if they had more of a character to them and associated with them. So instead of, dressing someone up just as like, a snowman or a present, why are they dressed up as a snow or present? Like, where are they from? Is it from this like magic Christmas town? Is it from a movie or, whatever? Kind of giving them more of a character. And sometimes these character ideas kind of come from when I'm like, oh my God, what do I do? And in this case, that was this. I was sitting here like, what do I do to make this space more interesting? I'm like, let's put an apron because aprons are cute, and it's baking and you think of Christmas cookies and the snowman. It's ironic because they melt when it's hot. So like the oven. So yeah.
We got another question from Zoe. How do you get the best key design details while also creating variation?
Okay. How do I get the best key design details while also creating variation? I think what's good to recognize is that your first idea isn't always your best idea. And it's definitely taken me a long time to realize that. So in this case, I really like this like fluffy white trim, and I really like the coattails on this. But am I going to do all 5 variations with fluffy trim and coattails? Like, no, I'm going to definitely play around with different things, and looking at reference images of presents, you might find something that you forgot or is associated with presents and whatnot. So yeah, it's kind of one of those things where the more you sit and sort of just play with it and not be afraid to make a quote, I'm going to put it in quotes, bad design choice. It's, sometimes bad design choices help lead you to good design choices. And it's one of those things where if you settle on your first concept and say, yeah, like I'm satisfied with that, and not having the attitude of like, how can I make this better? And how can I make this more, of a rich sort of story and a rich costume and an interesting thing to look at. I think that kind of helps with how do I get the best key designs the more you do it. Yeah, fail often, you get better. That's how you do it. So I hope that answers your question. Okay. What percentage of your work is done with paper and pen? So we actually had a costume thing recently that I started it on paper because I found that even with all the tools like Procreate and Photoshop and all of that, I've never found anything quite like pencil to paper. There's just, digital cannot replicate it. Someday it probably will, but right now I don't think it can. So in that case, all I wanted to do was I started out with my little croaky characters, and I literally just scribbled, and having that looseness from being able to, pivot all directions and having a pencil glide across paper rather than a screen. That's how I started the project. And then once I sort of developed some shapes and the general sort of silhouette, so in this case, the silhouette is like poofy skirt, poofy hat, whatever. That's when I kind of brought it over to digital and like started refining it. And like I said before, doing the colors and, playing with those sort of details. But I'd say it's probably like 25% on paper when getting started, and then 75% digital once I've sort of narrowed down kind of what I'm looking to do.
That's a great point. Another question we have is there a project you're most proud of that you've worked on?
If we're talking themed entertainment, it's probably Quantum's newest show, Once. I don't know if anybody we haven't posted the like official running of it yet, but there's tons of people who have posted it online already. Once, an enchanted storybook spectacular from Vin Wonders. Fuquoc was the name of the park. I was an intern when I worked on that project, and it was kind of scary how much, like, I'm gonna put in quotes, power they gave me, because I was literally like 15. So like seeing like all of their like, stuff on there, I was like, this is scary, seeing something I like drew when I was like a little child essentially on like a real stage for like real people to see is kind of crazy. And I actually, with the costumes for those, I didn't necessarily design them, but I did illustrate all of them. So that was kind of cool. That was like my first costuming experience. But yeah, but then, non-themed entertainment work, it's the United plane. Obviously, it's a plane. It's pretty cool. So like,
Yeah.
go check it out. It's on my website.
All right. And I think we're at our last question. Is there
Yeah.
somewhere we can all share our drawings today and show what we came up with? See a virtual parade. And yes, there absolutely is. Feel free to post them on Twitter, LinkedIn, Facebook, Instagram. Just make sure that you tag the Themed Entertainment Association, and then also use the hashtag TEA Drawing Days so that we can all show our little parade.
Yeah, that was the goal of this from the beginning. I had told Sam, like, let's make a little parade of all different characters and costumes, and I want to see what everybody comes up with. So yay, I appreciate everyone for participating. I know people are scary to draw. It's hard and scary, so I get it.
And if you're feeling so bold, print out another one of those Proki sheets and create something new. Pull out a new prompt, trees or fireplace. I don't know. Those are all holiday kind of things. Hot cocoa, but I think that we are now, I see that we have one last question we have time for. Are there any particular tropes you tend to play with or stay away from to break from tradition for the juxtaposition?
traditionally, I like to have the idea of when I'm designing these things, I want the performer to be comfortable. I think
Mhm.
that's something that we all need to consider, is that this is like a real thing that a real person will be wearing and carrying around. So if you're going to make it super heavy, like how can you fix that so they're not literally dying of back pain at the end of the parade? And, how can you make it so that they can spin and twirl and dance around in confidence and not be like afraid of like a wardrobe malfunction? Like that's something that I like to consider when designing these things, not making something too low cut or making something too high cut or making something too tight around the knees or the arms, so that when they go do their moves, it's not going to be restrictive. I try to just do my best to create something unique and different that's not necessarily been overdone and been done before, and kind of your stereotypical. So a lot of the times, yes, I'll watch these parades that have come out recently. I'll check out other countries and what they're doing in their designs and kind of see how I can take inspiration from all sorts of different things, whether it's actual costumes or whether it's something completely different like toy design, taking what they dress toys in and sort of, that sort of thing. And not just sticking to one point of reference, I think, is a good way to help things stay fresh and, not get so sucked into doing the same thing and the same formula every time you design something.
Awesome. That's a fantastically informative answer. So I think that brings us to time, and I just want to thank everyone for showing up today and joining us for drawing days. And most of all, I want to thank Corinne for sharing her expertise in this facet of costume design for art and sketching, and how we can help better visually communicate our ideas. If you're seeing this video right now, and are joining with us, don't forget to post the drawings with TEA drawing days. If you're seeing this in the future, feel free to still post your drawings. Why not? Keep it all going. Any final thoughts and words from you, Corinne?
No, thank you so much, guys, for your support on my work and just all the amazing questions. It's really great and it helped ease a lot of my nerves, but people like you are why I keep doing what I'm doing. So thank you.
Absolutely. And we'll definitely have to have you back. This was amazing. So thank you again. And want to wish everyone a happy holiday season and a happy new year. And this is the final episode for this volume. Keep an eye out next year as we start to compile our next volume of artists for episodes of Drawing Days. That brings us to our close. So thank you again for joining us. And no matter what happens, just keep drawing. Bye, everyone.